Good day, everyone. Today, we are going to tackle the factor analytic trait theory of Raymond Cattell. The proponent of this factor analytic trait theory is none other than Raymond Bernard Cattell. Cattell was born on March 20, 1905 in Birmingham, England to a family of engineers. Cattell was a British and American psychologist and is considered as one of the world's leading personality theorists. Upon graduation, his interest began to shift in social problems, wherein he came to realize that the physical sciences did not equip him to deal with social ailments. Thus, he concluded that to get beyond human irrationalities, he had to study the workings of the mind itself. And at the age of 23, he earned his doctoral degree in psychology. At the age of 9, the young Cattell became aware of the brevity of life when he saw trainloads of wounded soldiers returning from the battlefield of France during World War I. There is a chance that his lifelong, intense dedication to work could have originated from these experiences. Cattell was enormously prolific, publishing more than 500 journal articles and more than 50 books. Cattell died on February 2, 1998 in Honolulu, Hawaii. As we know, Gordon Allport identified more than 4,000 to 5,000 traits, and psychologists view this number as unmanageable due to its vastness. Meanwhile, Cattell worked on these traits and at last he lessened it to 171 traits, and with the use of factor analysis, he was able to summarize it further and yielded 35 primary traits, 23 for normal population and 12 for pathological ones. And after years of studying traits, Cattell defined it as a relatively permanent reaction tendencies that are the basic structural units of the personality. Now, we're going to proceed with the factor analysis. Factor analysis is a tool used to identify the structure of personality. It is a technique of mathematical statistics and not psychology. However, with the use of their knowledge on personality, psychologists did able to attach psychological labels to the factors. Early in Cattell's career, he gained knowledge of the newly developed technique of factor analysis by Charles Spearman, by which he used to measure mental abilities. Thus, Cattell applied the method to the structure of personality. If you want to have a more detailed explanation of factor analysis, please view the other provided PDF sources. After working on traits, Cattell classified traits in several ways. First, Cattell distinguished between common traits and unique traits. Next, he divided them into ability, temperament, and dynamic traits. The third class of traits is surface trait versus source traits. Lastly, Cattell further classified source traits by determining their origin as either constitutional or environmental mode traits. First, Cattell distinguished between common and unique traits. Common traits are possessed by everyone to some degree. Everyone has these traits, but some people have them to a greater extent than others. Examples are intelligence and extroversion. The second type of trait is the unique trait. It is a trait specific to one or few person. These traits are particularly apparent in our interest and attitude. For example, our interest in basketball or our attitude towards K-pop idols. The next classification is through dividing them. First is the ability traits. It refers on the person's skills and abilities in dealing with the complexity of problem-solving situation. It determines how effectively we work toward our goals. An example of this trait is our ability to reason or our intelligence. The next type of trait is the temperament trait. It refers to our emotion and feelings, and it helps us determine how we react to the people and situation in our environment. Examples are how we are assertive, fretful, bold, or easygoing we are. The third trait is our dynamic traits. It is the driving forces of our behavior. They define our motivations and ambitions. Some of these motivational traits are inborn, whereas others are learned through contact with the environment. Our learned dynamic traits include the sentiment and the attitude. And also, Cattell refers to our inborn traits or hereditary motives as ergs, as it is innate. Cattell refers to the relationship between an attitude, sentiment, and erg as a substitution chain, a term he borrowed from Henry Murray. We have to note that our ability, temperament, and dynamic traits are seen as capturing the major stable elements of personality. We have the third classification. We have the surface trait. Surface traits are personality characteristics that correlate with one another but do not constitute a factor because they are not determined by a single source. We also have the source trait. The source trait is a basic element of personality. It is identifiable only through factor analysis, and it is the converse of surface trait. Furthermore, Cattell did also classify source trait into constitutional and environmental mold traits. Constitutional traits originate in biological condition but are not necessarily innate. For example, alcohol or drug use can lead to behaviors such as carelessness, talkativeness, and slurred speech because of its effect on our physiology. The next one is the environmental mold traits. It is derived from the influences in our social and physical environment. Such examples are our behavior that result from the influence of our friend, work environment, or neighborhood. Raymond Cattell relied on three different types or three different sources of data about personality in finding those traits. The first data is the L data. It relates to the behavior in actual, everyday situations such as school performance or interaction with peers. The second data is Q data. It involves self-report data or responses to questionnaire and different personality inventories. The third data is the T data. It involves what Cattell called objective test, in which a person responds without knowing what aspect of behavior is being evaluated. However, it is important to note that to most psychologists, this use of the word objective is misleading. Such tests are usually called subjective because of the biases that affect scoring and interpretation for the reason that the result obtained from these methods are often consistent. Different methods do at times lead to different sets of factors. Cattell used factor analysis to identify the basic personality traits. As mentioned earlier, Cattell yielded 35 primary traits, 23 of which are from normal population, and the most studied of this is the 16 personality factor or traits, which was later on developed as 16 personality factor test to identify its characteristic. Cattell described the 16 traits on a continuum. In other words, everybody has some degree of every trait. The key to assessment is determining where on the continuum or scale an individual falls. One may get high or low score in every primary trait or factors. Initially, Cattell made up neologisms such as alaxia, cisia, parmia, autia, haria, and so on to name his personality trait factors, hoping to avoid misinterpretations of them. Nonetheless, the terms used here now roughly capture the meaning of this trait factor. As can be seen, they cover a wide variety of aspects of personality, particularly in terms of temperament and attitudes. In general, the factors found with Q data appear to be similar to those found with L data, but some were unique to each kind of data. So we have here 16 personality factor. We have the factor A, warmth, factor B, reasoning, factor C, emotional stability, factor E, dominance, factor F, liveliness, factor G, rule consciousness, factor H, social boldness, factor I, sensitivity, factor L, vigilance, factor M, abstractedness, factor N, privateness, factor O, apprehensiveness, factor Q, factor Q1, openness to change, factor Q2, self-reliance, factor Q3, perfectionism, and lastly, we have the factor 4, which is the tension. So studies have shown that this 16 personality factor test can predict marital stability, and can also be used for research, clinical diagnosis, and predicting success on the job. After defining personality in terms of traits, Cattell then proceeds to predict human behavior by means of an equation. In terms of statistics, Cattell developed MAVA or multiple abstract variance analysis with specification equation embodying genetic and environmental variables and their interactions. So we have here the equation of specification equations. The equation proceeds like this. Pj is the performance and the response predicted in a given situation. We also have T1, T2, which are the traits of the individual for whom the prediction is being made. Such traits include dynamic, temperament, or even the ability traits. We also have here the B1, B2. These are the weights determined by factor analysis. It reflects the relevance of each trait to the predicted response, which is the PJ. The result is, as you get a higher total score, it indicates that a specific response will most likely to happen, and a lower score indicates the opposite. Furthermore, Cattell did also quantify the degree of intrapsychic conflict experience over this decision. One method for doing so is the conflict index. Here are the formula. Conflict index is equal to square root sum of squared negative b weights over sum of squared positive b weights. So, if the result is nearer to 1, it indicates a high degree of internal conflict, with a positive and negative sign influences on this decision being fairly equal. However, if instead the result were close to 0 or infinity, then the decision would be little or no conflict. Ergo, Cattell claims not only to predict human behavior by means of specification equation with mathematical precision, but also to measure quantitatively the strength of inner conflict that one has. If you need a more detailed explanation and examples, please see the book of Robert Owen. Raymond Cattell also proposed 6 stages in the development of personality covering the entire lifespan. We have here 6 stages of personality development, starting from infancy until old age. On the first stage, we have the infancy. Start from birth until 6 years old. The major developments are weaning, toilet training, formation of ego, superego, and social attitudes. The second stage is the childhood. Starts from 6 years old until 14 years old. The major development is independence from parents and identification with peers. And we have here the third stage, which is the adolescence. It ranges from the age of 14 years old until 23 years old. According to Cattell, this stage is the most troublesome because the most of the conflict happen here. Conflict about independence, self-assertion, and even sex. The fourth stage is maturity, ranging from the age of 23 years old until 50 years old. And the development is satisfaction with career, marriage, and of course, having a family already. The fifth one is the late maturity, from the age of 50 years old until 65 years old. It is in this stage where the personality changes in response to physical and social circumstances. And the last stage is the old age, 65 beyond. This is where most adjustments happen because of the loss of friends, career, and even status. Now, let us proceed with the influences on personality development. The first one, we have the heredity versus environment. Cattell showed great interest in the relative influences of heredity and environment in shaping personality. He investigated the importance of hereditary and environmental factors by statistically comparing similarities found between twins reared in the same family, twins reared apart, non-twin siblings reared in the same family, and non-twin siblings reared apart. Thus, he was able to estimate the extent to which differences in traits could be attributed to genetic or to environmental influences. The next influence is the learning. Learning also strongly affect the personality development. Emotional responses such as attachments to other people and phobias become associated with environmental stimuli through the well-known process of classical conditioning. The third one is the parental behaviors. Cattell agrees that parents exert a significant influence on child personality. He discussed this in terms of the structural source traits. He relates affection to our warm home background, where the father is cheerful, the mother is calm, and the reasoning is used to control the child rather than punishment. At the same time, dominance is more common among children whose parents are authoritarian and enforce strict discipline. Cattell did also contend that formation of other structural source state is also related to various parental behaviors. Lastly, we have the birth order. It is an Adlerian issue. He finds that the oldest children tend to be high in ego strength, dominance, and conservatism, but low in self-sentiment strength. And that is all for factor analytic trait theory. My name is Muhammad Hanyel, and I wish you a pleasant and agreeable day. Thank you.